Toast, toast, toast. Let's go, y'all. Yo, what up? What up? Let's go. Tonight we're covering inner zone. We're going to talk about inner zone, inner space, outer space, the zone. We're going to be talking about the drowned world and William Gibson's Neuromancer. So, hope everybody's doing all right because these two books are pretty heavy. We're going to be talking about J.G. Ballard and William Gibson, and this is a pure literary stream. I'll be throwing in a couple of things and talking about a couple of things as we go on, but I hope everyone's doing all right. The Drowned World. I'm going to start with The Drowned World because it is a 1962 novel by J.G. Ballard. I've covered Ballard before about, I guess, less than a year ago. I talked about Crash, the book Crash, and also his film by David Cronenberg. Also, I've done one of his other books, Cocaine Nights, which was this. J.G. Ballard is an insane, right? I mean, he's not insane. He's not an insane person. He was hyper sane, and he really is one of the, I think, cornerstones of postmodernism. And it's important to talk about this. I don't mean to go on about postmodernism, but we find ourselves, of course, in a place where a lot of what Ballard wrote has come to pass, has come true. And it's not necessarily that he had some sort of prescient knowledge, but mainly this deals with the way that science fiction has come to be, I don't know, has come to exist in the world in which we live now. And a lot of science fiction, I think I've spent a lot of time on this over the past 2 weeks. I can't get enough of Ballard because the book, The Drowned World it's hypnotic in a way that I didn't expect. This deals mainly with the content, what the book concerns, which is sort of cli-fi. It's called cli-fi. This is climate fiction. And it really, like, I talked about Waterworld not too long ago, the movie Waterworld, which I think is underrated. I think it's a good Kevin Costner movie. It's got Dennis Hopper in it. I can't tell the difference between real life and the movies, man. Right. I mean, it's a fine movie. It's got a fine woman in it, Jean Triplehorn. But this is the sort of Greta stuff, where the poles have melted because of the sun experiences heavy solar bursts and it melts the ionosphere. So it's fictional. But what happens in the book is interesting because instead of science fiction that concerns outer worlds, we go into this weird zone where the characters start to meld with the landscape, this like Triassic landscape, and it becomes a book about inner space, even though the outer textures in which they live are like expanding. And so it concerns something called neuronics and deep time, which I'm going to get into. It's pretty heavy, and it's not such a long book, but it's so dense, and I think that fits the foliage, the foliated atmosphere, how dense it becomes, and how it sort of it portrays the lives of these characters, or who we are in what like sort of becomes. And okay, so let me try to make sense of this. I think that J.G. Ballard is amazing because he has a completely different way of looking at the future. And this is kind of old hat for anybody who knows this. But instead of looking at the future, which is now, in future now, in terms of a world where we have like robots walking around and we're on hoverboards, he didn't see any of that. He is sort of famous for saying that the future is boring. And this makes a lot of sense because this has come to be now. I think that his idea of looking at the future is a lot like in Crash, where the things that have come to pass since the second industrial revolution, and especially since the this big huge burst, this like rose opening up with the internet. It's a little like Wall-E. It's like in terms of its sentiments. So Wall-E is like these fat people, zooming around on their escalators or whatever, and there's robots in love and all this stuff. But essentially, the people are just like eating goblin slop, just puking on themselves, like rolling around this track, looking at live streams of just Funko Pops or whatever, right? I mean, that's the way it is. But in Ballard, he shows that technology is great. Technology and the way we make our lives easier by creating things is wonderful. But it will get to a point where we've created something that takes off and it's exponentially larger than what we can contain. And it's not that AI becomes sentient and a deep faked Arnold Schwarzenegger is after us while we're listening to like Rooster on a Motobot. It's that we've made everything, our imagination has melded with technology, and we can't aspire to anything more, and everything's boring. There's nothing everything we have is at our fingertips, and that just creates this vacuum effect where everything is a gray box, and there's nothing interesting anymore. There's no contrast in the landscape. This is like really hit me, especially, I mean, everybody knows this, but this is like really hit me in the last 2 weeks because, there's a place here called Scott's Addition. And it used to be this, industrial looking wasteland shithole, like in one part of the city. Well, that was fun. It's not that it didn't have character. It was nothing. It was just nothing. And then they had somebody come in with like an artisanal beer craft or whatever, and they made a bar for hipsters wearing suspenders, and that was fine. That's pretty cool, I mean, whatever. I don't know. It was a place for yuppies, zuppies or whatever to hang out. And then they got an arcade, and I went to the arcade once. I've only been to this place like twice, and it's a whole section of the city that was revitalized, and that's great. It's a place for young people to go and hang out, and there's lots of stuff to do, and that's really cool. And one night I went to this arcade, it's like a bar arcade. I was with a group of friends, and you buy tokens and you play Silent Hill or whatever, and I don't know, that trucker game. You ever played that big trucker game? Like you get in the truck and it's pretty cool. It's got like a gear shift. That's cool. That's cool for one night. And then like years went by, and then all of the like old tobacco factories that were shut down and empty, and they had pigeons and the broken glass and stuff. Well, they started to buy those, and then they filled them up with like tech companies. I don't know what they're making here. What kind of tech company they have here? And then like it was cool and stuff. And then what happened was all of the apartment building, they started to build all these high rises. This is Ballard. They built all these high rises and apartment buildings, and it's like, who's gonna live in these places? How can there be enough people to live in all of these apartment buildings? And the apartment buildings are like, first they start off brick, and they kind of match the city and stuff. And the city did this stupid thing in the 70s where they had all these colonial style buildings. They had all these old buildings, and because it was the 1970s, they tore them all down and they built boxes. right? It's not that they're tearing down slum houses or something. They still do that. They're like tearing down these nice buildings. And so then now there's no contrast. There's no contrast between like neo architecture and old architecture, which is something like Boston has. A lot of these cities have done it right in major ways, but they didn't do that right here. So now it's all uniform. And then the apartment buildings, instead of brick, they start to build them cheaper and cheaper. So they make like these red, it's like a red, like, I don't even know what material this is. It's not like wood, it's not stone, it's some kind of like, you know, lab built fiberglass or something. It looks like if you punch the wall, your arm would go right through it, but you would also break your whole shoulder, right? Does that make sense? Like from the street. And then the red is like there's like a blue and there's like a gray, and it's just these weird drab rust colors. And then they all have these little balconies, and they call them Romeo and Juliet balconies. I went and looked at an apartment in one of these places one time, and first of all, I pulled up to the rental office or whatever, and there was like two cops standing there, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's weird. I don't want to go in here now, but why are the cops just hanging out here? And she's like, these are our private cops. And these were like cops. They weren't like security guards. They were cops just standing there looking at me while I was trying to ask about this. I was with my mom. It was like we're like going out to look for an apartment. She was helping me. So I was looking at this apartment, and then I was like, all right, how what do they run? And she was like, well, we only have these ones open. And then she was like, well, you can get one with a balcony, but like you can't put anything on the balcony. And I'm like, all right, well, I get it. It's Romeo and Juliet. I said, it's good for smoking. She said, oh no, you can't smoke here. Smoking is illegal. And I was like, no, I'm talking about, smoking a cigarette. This is where the cigarette was born. This is where they're made, in this city. She was like, no, that's illegal. And she looked at the cop like nodded. He's like, yeah, yep, that's illegal. She said, if you smoke a cigarette, then we will come and you'll get a citation. And I'm like, a citation? She said, and if you ever have people over, if you ever have a party or something, don't even think about a party. We only have parties of like 5 people. You can only have 5 people in your apartment. I said, it's my apartment. I don't even live here yet. And it's not even my apartment, but I can't have a party in my own apartment. And she said, no, you can't do that because you have to fill out the request form. And I said, I don't want to have people entertainment. I don't need to, I'm not trying to request friends for a party. I will already have people over for the party. And she said, well, you need to fill out a request. And I said, why? And she said, well, you can't come on the property if you haven't requested. I said, but I came on the property right here just to come in the rental office. She said, well, that's different, but you will get fined and you've been warned. And I said, I don't even live here. I'm trying to live here. Are you talking to me? Is this a place where I live, where I can live here? And she said, well, if you meet the requirements. And I said, this place isn't even nice. I can smell the river from here. I can smell the keepo. Did you know that they found 26 bodies in the river this year? Did you know that? I said, did you know that they found 4 bodies without heads? They just found torsos. And they found 8 heads with no torsos right outside, right in that river over there. By the way, it's flooding into the little yard. So I don't even know. And she said, well, that's none of your concern. And I said, well, I don't think this looks like a great place to, you know what? I'll take my business elsewhere. Good day, madam. I didn't even have money to pay rent if I did live there. So, that was a waste of a few minutes. That's J.G. Ballard. That really happened. That really did happen. And everything is like that now, right? If you go, look, the suburbs used to be a place where, you were a kid in the 90s and everybody was a skater, right? And it was like, oh, the suburbs suck. And everybody's listening to Rancid and Lagwagon here, but and the schools are all public schools, and I went to a private school, so that's what I was threatened with, going to a public school. But Now the suburbs, well, then the suburbs became a desirable place because who wants to live in the city? I mean, look, I drove from here into the sort of adjacent city, and when I crossed over the line, uh, I saw a dog dragging a human body across the street. There, look, there's a school near here. I'm not kidding with you. I'm not joking. There is a school around here where in the news a few years ago, there was a front page story when they still had pages. There was a front page story about a human carcass in a ditch in front of the high school, and the students had been walking over it for 3 days before it was reported. For 3 days. No one, and then they did interviews on the television with some of the people in the community, and they were like, "Yeah, I saw him. I saw that. I saw that thing there. Yeah, I knew." But that's none of my business. It had footprints on this dirty shirt this carcass was wearing, right? Nobody cares. So that's JG Ballard right now. Not quite that. That's a little more fleshy than his books get. But the drowned world is wild because there's no more suburbs. There's no more anything. The cities are all underwater. They're all subterranean. It just reminds me of a couple of his other books because everything is gray. Now the suburbs are full of empty Taco Bells, and the Taco Bells, which in the 90s we thought were like, they were just kind of nothing. But now we look back and we're like, oh, those were vaporwave. Well, now the Taco Bells all look like gray shoeboxes. And the shoeboxes are full of the same Crocs that they put in the Mexican pizza. That's it, right? I got to stop saying right. I got to stop saying that because I watched this Annie Jacobson interview this week, and I appreciate Annie Jacobson. Okay, I'll do the Quentin Tarantino thing. Okay, right. Okay, well, Annie Jacobson was great. It was weird. It was weird when she was on Rogan 5 years ago. Do you remember this? She was on Rogan talking about Area 51. This was when she wrote about Area 51, and she has these great points, which are that Area 51 is a place where if you're going to have, DARPA tech, you're going to have it in this place where they can plant the Galian invasion so that boomers in RVs will show up and say, "Show me them damn aliens," and they'll make like cafes and diners, right? That are 50s style, like Fallout or something, but in RVs. And that way, the thing is right here, and then the thing they're looking at is right over here. So anytime the sloped wing B-33 comes in, they just go, "Oh, that's an alien ship," right? So. But whenever Rogan asked her about what's in the book, she'd say, "Well, you'll just have to read it." It's like, that's why you're there, to talk about it, talk about the book. Well, I saw an interview that she did with that Lex dude. Who's that Lex guy? Who's that Lex guy that seems, he seems like somebody else, but they put on a voice modulator and a Men in Black suit, and it's like he's asking questions to the person, and they're right there, but they like split framed it so he's not really there. Does that make sense? Well, she's talking about CIA and stuff, and it's like she just went all the way into she just CIA. Is that what she always was? Am I being slow here? I assume that's what that is, because he asked her a question about, well, how do you know this? And she said, "Well, I know because my contacts, right?" And he says, "Well, so is there anything you can tell us?" And she says, "Well, the CIA, which is the bravest and most secretive organization in the world, and never does anything that they don't accomplish. And they do that because they are supporting us. Because they want to protect us every day. So if one were to ask them questions, they wouldn't say it. And he says, well, then how did you get the information? And she says, well, as a journalist, one would fact check through multiple sources. One may even have an index in their book and notes. That's what one would have. And you're like, what do you mean one? You mean I? You mean I did that because I'm a person and I wrote this book. But she doesn't say that. She is a person. She doesn't say that. What is the deal? That's just like Neil Armstrong on that Neil, which what they say, Neil Armstrong backwards is alien. That's a thing. Well, did you see that one black and white interview that he did on BBC where they're like, the guy goes, what is space like? And he says, space is a concept one would think of between objects. And he's like, no, I'm talking about outer space. And he goes, one would think of something outer as exterior to one's self. And he's like, I don't know why you're using air quotes, but when you went to the moon, what did you see? And he says, well, if one were to go to the moon, one would see the effects of gravity on the lunar rover. I'm mixing up the accents here, but they're all the same. That's what the interview is. In other words, after reading The Drowned World, everywhere I look now, it's like people are impersonating people. I know. I'm not. Everyone's noticed that for many years. I've noticed things for at least like, I don't know, a few months. I'm a noticer. Well, anyway, no, I've been noticing things for like 20 years, and it's just the advertising is so just everything is wrong. Everything is so we're in this mid space between things happening, right? This is I said right again. See, thanks, Andy Jacobson. It's like there's nothing happen. It's like the interspace between gangster rap and will.i.am electronic rap. It's like in the middle, you get Ja Rule, and Ja Rule's fine. That's fine. Every day we don't living it up. Right? The one with Bobby Brown that I heard in the Burger King in Belfast. Right? They had J-Lo in that one song, which is a weird song. It sounds like kind of like it was made on a Nintendo, but that's a fine song. But we're in a mid zone. And is this it? Is this the way it's going to be? There's no one like who even cares about television, I guess. I don't know why I'm talking about that. But that is Ballard. That is what he's talking about. All his books are about in the future, which is now there's like no blood flowing in people in the main thing, in the way we look, that people look at the world, in the way that architecture works, in the way that business. Hopefully there's blood coming back into the system. But look at the drone thing. I'm going to get to the book in a second. Look at the drone thing. Look at the New Jersey drone thing. Have you seen this? Of course you have. This is like, look at that. That's fucking crazy. Yo, I never saw that before. Did you see that? Fucking red and green lights. It's like that's Santa Claus's sled. But what is it? It's the size of an Escalade. Well, that video looked like an airplane, and you could hear the airplane noise. But then there are these. They're like, oh, the Coast Guard cutter got chased by a drone. And I saw today in the Pentagon briefing, they said it got chased by 33 drones, a swarm of them, just like in Olympus has risen or whatever the last Gerard Butler was, right? Project Bluebeam. So then John Kirby comes out and he's like, that's tough business. Was it Nick Mullen said? That's tough business. Look, I don't know what it is. I don't know what to tell you. We're about to leave on a Friday to go to our houses on the beach. I might see something. I might see a drone. I might see laser weapons. But that's tough cookies. I don't know. I don't know how you expect us to figure it out. Okay. I don't really care. I don't really care at all anyway. Okay. Whatever. But I did last night look at the stars because I'm a star whacker and no, that's Randy Quaid. He's been the star whackers. We don't want the star whackers. I'm a stargazer, right? So I was looking at the stargate. I was stargazing and I saw a star up there, and I said, "That's a beautiful star." And then it looked like a green neon triangle was beaming at me. Now, that might have been the angel dust, but I don't know what it was. I think it was just a star. I asked my neighbor, am I tripping or is that a star? And she said, you tripping, boo. But there's all kinds of weird stuff happening. There's weird stuff. So let's talk about The Drowned World. Again, The Drowned World was written in 1962. This is Ballard's, really his first novel. Ballard is known mainly for writing Empire of the Sun. Empire of the Sun was the movie that broke through with Christian Bale. He was a kid. It was one of my favorite movies when I was young because Empire of the Sun, which is the story of J.G. Ballard, and it's a novel. But when you listen to interviews with J.G. Ballard, what he talks about is that he was the son of some. He was in an English family living in Shanghai. He was born in 1930, so he was just a kid when the stuff started to pop off with Japan bombing Shanghai. I almost moved to Shanghai. I was supposed to move there in the summer of 2005, and I was it 2005? Yeah, 2005, and I was all set. I read every book about Shanghai, and then the last minute, I was going there to teach English and work with a group of actors putting on a television show in Shanghai. And then we were going to be teaching English at this university in the daytime. It was all mixed into one. So kind of how we were going to fund ourselves. And we didn't go there. We went to Kuala Lumpur. We went to KL in Malaysia at the very last minute. So I ended up going to Malaysia, which is totally different from Shanghai. I was ready to go and move to the international zone and the Bund and all this stuff. Well, anyway, so what happened was that when Japan took over Shanghai, they moved all of the expats to a concentration camp, essentially. And when Ballard talks about this, they say, "Oh, was it difficult?" And he says, "No, it was the greatest time of my life. I was a kid, so all they had to do is show us some dirt with some rocks, and we would go play, and we played war, and it was cool because the war was right there. So they had all these soldiers." And they had samurai swords and all this stuff. And, and it was fun. It was fun. The hard part was when he went back to England, because when he went back to England, he said he knew he was going to be there for the rest of his life. And that when he went there, everything had been blitzed and everything was just drab. And that leads you into his fiction and the way that really the UK still is in many ways, with these row houses in sort of labyrinthine neighborhoods. And that's here too, but not without the blitz. That's the kind of urban sprawl that I was talking about. That's their version of it. And then we have here. Well, there's just when people lose, when Baudrillard talks about this, it's like when the system pushes against people and they have no faith, and they get boxed in on all sides. They end up in a box. They end up in these boxed houses, and all they have left is to consume. They just have the cathedral of the mall. So the 90s had this. The 80s and 90s were the explosion of what Ballard had talked about with this temple of consumerism. You walk into a mall and you see like the roof of the mall is glass, but the lattice work kind of mirrors the ceiling of a Gothic cathedral, but it's transparent. And not because you're looking, up at the beautiful sky, but because like your lives are transparent and everything is bright lights and neon. And that's just what it symbolizes in terms of you gain meaning through objects, through the things that you possess. And then the malls crumbled and now they're all dead malls and we've got some pretty good vaporwave out of it. And there are places for people to still get yelled at for going skateboarding, I assume. But, the Suncoast video, which was so cool when I was a kid, I'd go into Suncoast video and it's like black marble and they've got sets of Indiana Jones and it's all VHS. They got the sweetest posters for me to put on my wall when I'm 9. Well, that goes away and now we long for Suncoast video. So there's something, because now you don't even, the cathedral of consumerism is your own home and your phone. And that's it. That's it. So that's Ballard. So what happens in the drown world is we get we get these characters who are trying to survive in the poles. They're only, the sun has melted the ionosphere and the polar ice caps have melted and the water has risen over the cities. Everything is submerged. And we have an equatorial zone that is completely bursting with radiation. And even the only place that's safe for humans is the polar region, because the polar region is semi-temperate. And the people live on these mechanical floating docks or whatever. And when you go outside, they're sort of militarized, but there's no more military. There's nothing left. There's just a few people, and they're sort of archetypal characters representing the people, the survivors. There's one lady who is like still kind of sunbathing, and she's got perfumes and stuff, and they have these, they venture out into what used to be the cities, but now there's like the generations are going on and they don't even remember what the cities were, but there's still a couple old fellas that remember London, and everything is underwater. Well, then one of the guys takes off, he disappears, and they go looking for him. And when he goes out, the water in the polar regions like starts to go down, and out of that we have this annihilate, like the movie Annihilation, right, where the animals are huge and the dragonflies are like the size of albatrosses, and everything is reptilian. So there's like whole continents full of crocodiles and alligators, and there's iguanas everywhere, and everything is just green, but it's also large. And so then the main character starts to have these dreams. They all start to have these weird dreams, and in his dreams, it's like he starts to go into this strange zone where when he wakes up, the jungle is calling to him. So it's like, get off of the place and go and seek for something. And he talks to one of the old guys about it, and the old guy's like, this is something called neuronics. Okay, this is neuronic time. And what your mind is doing is it's trying to tell you to forget about things that are your immediate needs and try and find the larger thing that's calling you what life is, and it's larger than that. But it's not in a healthy way. So like, for instance, like if they get an infection or they get a cut or something, they just ignore it. So because they're like, oh, it's calling to me. So the people are all dying. The people that have lived are going to die because they can't even make it to this place. But the reason that this happens, and this is wild, is because somewhere in man's DNA, your memories of original people, the first people of your ancestors, is unlocking. It's because the atmosphere is primitive and primordial. And so it's like you're the person that your ancestor was. And now you've gone through this period where people have become, humanity has moved. It's not necessarily evolution, but it's like moved on to where we are now. And the things that we consider about what life means now. And this is calling to you. So then what happens is this kind of Kurtzian Judge Holden character shows up with his gang of dystopian renegades, and they're like, hey, we're going to go raiding. And this is like a kind of a loose paraphrase here. And they go into these places, and they have the ability to like pump the water out of these cities. So they pump the water out, and rising up out of it is this city. And it's weird to like walk on solid ground. And when they do that, it also stinks, right? It's like your house has been flooded with mud, layers and layers of mud, and all these reptiles are crawling out around it, and everything's slimy. So it's like the primordial ooze, but it's what we've made in the cities. And so now all he wants is for this to go away. He wants it to go away. And meanwhile, this like Judge Holden type of character this is absolute anarchy. It's like anarchy in the worst way. And he's got to get back to the so he gets back to the place, the polar zone or whatever. And then he decides, I'm going to go out and find this guy who left before. So he goes out in the jungle, and he finds this corpse of this long, skinny man leaned up against a tree, like in No Country for Old Men, but the guy's like long. It's more like Kurtz, like when they find Kurtz in Heart of Darkness, because he's like long. He's not like Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now, like big and bulbous, like this monolith or whatever. He's like this shadow man, but the guy's alive, and he's like, oh, he's like, what are you doing? And the guy's like, oh. And he like points. So then this guy takes over the journey, and he's like, I don't know where I'm going, but he starts heading towards the equator. And we realize that he's heading towards the equator because he's going to be the new Adam. He wants to be the new man, but it's not quite an Adam. It's like you break on through to the other side. He's moved into he's a Gnostic Adam, and that's it. That's the book. But the reason that the book is great is because of the language. The language is fantastic. The language is amazing. In the introduction here, this guy says that he says, so here's a prophecy. Fictional divination will always be hopelessly haphazard. The unfolding of world historical events is itself haphazard and therefore unaesthetic. And the future is, in a sense, defined by its messy inscrutability. Besides, the art of fiction owes allegiance to a muse, a goddess as pure as her 9 sisters. That's the 9 watchers Jamie was talking about. And not to some bustling Madame Sosostris. This is T.S. Eliot's famous clairvoyant with her wicked pack of cards. You remember that in The Wasteland. Nevertheless, there are certain writers whose visionary power is indifferent to the corroboration of mere upshots. Writers who seem to be able to feel and use this is the world hum of the near after. This is a quote from Don DeLeo, of course, still alive. Should have gotten the Nobel Prize this year, but he didn't. And the second is from J.G. Ballard. The world hum, of course, is the Don DeLeo. That's white noise. That runs through Don DeLeo. And I'm going to be covering Underworld because I just finally got it. So this says, let's see. I wrote the fusion of mood and setting, the mapping of a landscape of the troubled mind. That's Don DeLeo and World Hum. So let me take you through some of the parts of this book. This says, perhaps it was the absence of personal memories that made Karen's, that's the guy's name, Indifferent to the spectacle of these sinking civilizations, he had been born and brought up entirely within what had once been known as the Arctic Circle, now a subtropical zone with an annual mean temperature of 85 degrees, and had come southward only on joining one of the ecological surveys in his early 30s. The vast swamps and jungles had been a fabulous laboratory, the submerged cities little more than elaborate pedestals. Apart from a few older men such as Botkin, a Bear Botkin from Hamlet, there was no one who remembered living in them. And even during Botkin's childhood, the cities had been beleaguered citadels, hemmed in by enormous and disintegrated by panic and despair, reluctant Venices to their marriage with the sea. Their charm and beauty lay precisely in their emptiness, in the strange junction of two extremes of nature, like a discarded crown overgrown with wild orchids. The woman's name, by the way, in this is Beatrice. And of course, this surely is a reference to the Inferno, and to we just talked about Virgil's Aeneid, but Beatrice is one of the characters. Remember, in the Inferno, you can go see my Abyssal Zone Inferno analysis, Dante's Inferno, and it's like the book becomes a kind of foliated Inferno. I'm going to find you something else here. Let's see. I'm going to read you a couple of these passages. Neuronic Time, Phantasmagorical Journeys, page 41. Let's see. Oh, this is in Surrealism. The movie, I keep saying the movie. I've covered so many movies recently. I keep referencing the movie. There's no movie of this. Ballard is like unfilmable. Apart from Empire of the Sun, Crash was good. It's still not the book, but the film was good. So they're doing American Psycho. You know what grinds my gears? Here's, by the way, let me predict what's going to happen with American Psycho. Since we're talking about postmodernism and we've done so much, what's his name? Bret Easton Ellis, Don DeLeo, Cormac McCarthy, J.G. Ballard. This is like sort of the four corners for me of postmodernism. Of course, there's Pynchon and all these other people. Those are the four that I go to. So here's my prediction about American Psycho, and this is probably not a hot take or whatever, but the reboot is going to be a dark and serious look at the book. It's not going to be the satirical humor in Mary Herron's film. It's going to be much darker because we've covered American Psycho here. Because there is much in the book that is left out of the film. Obviously, it's the same, but it's completely different. That's one of the great strengths of the film. The film can work on multiple levels, and the book is fantastic, but it's going to be it's not going to be a look at the humor of postmodernism and the character that can be interpreted as a humorous, is it completely fake? Is this all in his mind, or is this a comedy, a kind of dark comedy of manners, or is this a actual serial killer? It's going to be the serial killer, is what I think it'll be. And I think that, it's obviously not good. Don't do this. There's so much Bret Easton Ellis. I'm glad that they're making it, because I'm glad that Ellis can, that's fine, because I like his writing, and that's good that it'll be more, of his work, but he's got other books. Look, they could do Glamorama. We did a Monarch model assassin stream on Glamorama and Zoolander. It's kind of what happens in Zoolander is kind of Glamorama. They could do Lunar Park. Lunar Park is by far his best book. It's so complex, and it's so dark but funny, and it's a meta statement on the author as character. It's like he loses his character. He loses himself in the character. He loses himself, man. He's out with his people, man. He forgets about himself with his people, man. He forgets himself. So there's a lot of Ellis. This is, look, man. It's like, okay. Idea. Here's what happened. Here's what's happening in film right now. This is what's happening. This has been happening for 10 years. I told you how my friend Paul told me about how they were going to remake the Disney movies. This is like 2012 or something. It was a long time ago. And he works in Hollywood. He's a part of the industry. And I said, hey, what's happening with movies right now? He also, by the way, and I said this a couple weeks ago, but he predicted the absolute dearth of good movies for a couple years because of the writer's strike. That's probably not hard to predict. But I didn't never consider that before talking to him. I just didn't think of it. But it wasn't a prediction from him. He was just telling me what was going to happen. And he was right. And we're still getting out of that right now. But this is what's happening, like in a Hollywood exec's office, studio office right now. Okay. So guy comes in and he goes, and he's talking to the studio exec. And this is what I imagine was happening. And he goes, hey, I got an idea for a story. All right. Idea for a movie. And the guy's like, shoot, let's hear it. And he goes, idea for a movie. All right. You're a Disney executive, right? Let me tell you what I want. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have this character, right? And it's a robot. And the robot, he's got like these glowing eyes, and he's on this planet, and there's just like garbage everywhere. It's just trash, right? It's garbage. And this lonely robot, his job, he doesn't have a speaker, kind of a floating robot. He's not like R2D2 or that Gleep Glorp or whatever. He's floating along, but we feel ourselves in him, right? Like he's all alone. And then all of a sudden he meets this floating star. And the star is a robot. It's like a drone, really, but it's like a drone bot. And he sees the star and he wants to go after her because she's a star to him, but it's like the North Star. He's pursuing the star. And he follows her and he's in love, right? He presents her some piece of garbage. And he says, we're supposed to think this is a flower, but it's a Nike box or whatever. Well, they end up in this place and there's all they're humans, right? There's these humans and they're all just, going on these chairs and stuff. They're all floating around. They're all watching old episodes of Geraldo because it's trash world, right? But guess what? This is Earth. It's Earth. It's a statement on climate, right? And we're going to call it WALL-E. But here's the catch. It's live and they're human. What do you think? And the guy's like, the studio exec's like, love it. Love it. Get me the script writer. Have a script for me tomorrow. You got 24 hours. Do it. Right? So they hire a guy, he brings in a script. They get it done. He's like, good. I really like it. I'm going to need you to go through 100 more drafts by tomorrow. But we're going to get 100 more drafts of this thing. And if you don't do it, you're fired and I'll ruin your life. But I love it. We're going to do it. Let's do it. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. And they're like, look, we did it with the Little Mermaid. We did it with the Little Mermaid. And people are going to be pissed. Like, we're going to have all these people out there and they're going to go, oh, she's not like the cartoon. Guess what? Mermaids aren't even real in the fucking first place. It was a drawing. Who gives a shit? Get it done. Make the movie. Do it. That's what's happening. That's it. Yeah. BLA, watched Heretic recently and love to hear your take on it. Yeah, I covered Heretic. I covered Heretic on the member stream. Was that on the member stream? Is it in the members? Is it in the members? No, it's not on a member stream. You can get a membership if you want to get a membership. Oh, you loved to hear my take on it. Yeah, you loved my take. Well, that's good. Or if you want to hear my take, if you haven't seen it, you can check out that stream on Heretic and what was that other one called? I don't know. It was like 3 streams ago. Cuckoo. That was it. You can check that out. So anyway, that's what's happening. All right, let's look at phantasmagorical zones. That's what I was going to talk about. The book is phantasmagorical in extremis. It is a wonderful book. This page 41. Okay, it says surrealist Delvaux. Over the mantelpiece was a huge painting by the early 20th century surrealist Delvaux, in which ashen-faced women danced naked to the waist with dandified skeletons in tuxedos against a spectral, bone-like landscape. On another wall of Max Ernst's self-devouring phantasmagoric jungles screamed silently to itself like the sump of some insane unconscious. In a few moments, Karen stared quietly at the dim yellow annulus of Ernst's sun, glowering through the exotic vegetation, a curious feeling of memory and recognition signaling through his brain. Far more potent than the Beethoven, the image of the archaic sun burned against his mind, illuminating the fleeting shadows that darted fitfully through its profoundest deeps. Memory and recognition calls to mind memory and desire, stirring dull roots of spring rain. Again, when you get the Eliot-like landscape. Simply because it's page 55, simply because we all carry within us a submerged memory of the time when the giant spiders were lethal and when the reptiles were the planet's dominant life form, that says, feeling the brass compass which weighed down in his pocket, Karen said, so you're frightened that the increased temperature and radiation are alerting similar IRMs in your own minds. Not in our minds, Robert. These are the oldest memories on Earth. The time codes carried in every chromosome and gene. Every step we've taken in our evolution is a milestone inscribed with organic memories, from the enzymes controlling the carbon dioxide cycle to the organization of the brachial plexus and the nerve pathways to the pyramid cells in the midbrain. Each is a record of 1,000 decisions taken in the face of a sudden physico-chemical crisis. Just as psychoanalysis reconstructs the original traumatic situation in order to release the repressed material, so we are now plunging back into the archaeo-psychic past, uncovering the ancient taboos and drives that have been dormant for epochs. The brief span of an individual life is misleading. Each one of us is as old as the entire biological kingdom, and our bloodstreams are tributaries of the great sea of its total memory. The uterine odyssey of the growing fetus recapsulates the entire evolutionary past, and its central nervous system is a coded timescale, each nexus of neurons and each spinal level marking a symbolic station, a unit of neuronic time. The further down the CNS you move, from the hindbrain through the medulla into the spinal cord, you descend back into the neuronic past. For example, the junction between the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae, between T12 and L1, is the great zone of transit between the gill-breathing fish and the air-breathing amphibians with the respiratory rib cages, the very junction where we stand now on the shores of this lagoon between the Paleozoic and Triassic eras. Bodkin went on. If you like, you could call this the psychology of total equivalence, let's say neuronics for short, and dismiss it as metabiological fantasy. However, I'm convinced that as we move back through geophysical time, so we re-enter the amniotic corridor and move through the spinal and archaeopsychic time, recollecting in our unconscious minds the landscapes of each epoch, each with a distinct geological terrain, its own unique flora and fauna, as recognizable to anyone else as they would be to a traveler in a Wellesian time machine. Except this is no scenic railway, but a total reorientation of the personality. If we let these buried phantasms master us as they reappear, we'll be swept back helplessly into the flood tide like pieces of flotsam. Yeah, it's crazy because this is a strange hypnotic book. It is completely hypnotic because, yeah, Kristen, lots of words to say nothing true. Yeah, the evolution, is whatever, right? But what the book is showing you is that the characters have now ended up in an outer landscape of their own evolutionary mindset. In other words, when they get to a place where They have nothing left, and their understanding of the world is completely psychological. It turns them within themselves, but their inner selves are empty. And so their inner selves become this sort of inverted in reflection of the fact that the outer world is full of slime and amphibious. They think that the outer world is mirroring what their inner selves and who they are and what's made them. But what's strange is that when they live in a world where the world has become a giant mirror because everything is covered, everything is flooded. It's like they don't really consider, it doesn't even come into the paradigm of the book. And this is purposeful. This isn't, I don't think this is Ballard. This isn't, we can't read into this like the author's beliefs about the world necessarily. He is saying that this is what the postmodern ethos is, that they don't consider the flood. It's a drowned world, but it is devoid of any sort of inherent flood symbolism in the minds of the characters. So they don't consider that the world has been flooded because of wickedness. The world's been flooded because of climate. And that is true now. I mean, it amazes me that we don't hear people. I don't know do you ever hear critics, like you ever hear, a scientific priest saying, oh yeah, there was a flood, but it was because of climate change, because the people in the world, which you say as Genesis, were polluting the world, like physically polluting it. That's what did it. Is that something people, I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a thing, or if that's already a thing. I don't know. I don't really care, because that's a bunch of bullshit. The world flooded because God created the flood, and we deserve it. We deserved it. And then guess what? We got a covenant, and we're supposed to do better. That's what they say. Do better. Well, I don't know. I don't know if we do any better, but it was water, and it's going to be fire. Okay. I guess there's fire involved in this because it would be they don't consider that maybe the radiation is because the world burned and then flooded, but that's not in the paradigm of the book. I actually love this book because it becomes, if it's also like an inversion of poetry, because if poetry is the best words in the best order, an economy of language, what could be said in one instance is said in one line. If that's what a poem is, then this is a sort of a prose poem, but it's verbose because there's nothing to say, which actually makes for a good book. I'm not quite sure how to explain that. Most times great books are hypnotic because you find yourself in this theta wave of the language where you are completely engrossed in the landscape of literature. You are in the mind of the speaker. So the things that the book describes, you see and you hear. And that's why when the movie comes out, it doesn't match up, and it's not as good. It's rarely as good. Sometimes the vision of the movie can not supersede the book's vision, but it becomes an equal vision in terms of its integrity. So this works, but most of the time that doesn't happen. And I think that this book is like the opposite of that. It's like I became hypnotized reading this book where this never happens to me. I would read whole sections of the book and then go, I don't know where I am. And I would go back and reread those sections, and that never happens to me. And I would reread sections of the book and then go, oh, you know, let me fix this. There we go. I'm buffering here. I don't know why I'm buffering. Why am I still buffering? Why am I still buffering on here? Why would I be buffering? Right? That doesn't make sense. Why would I be buffering on here? I'm tired of buffering. I'm buff. But I just want to tell you, by the way, the food in the book is like, of course, the food in the book is all, maybe I had to close that window. The food in the book is all military grade. They still have morphine and they still have weapons. That's pretty cool. But, they have Twinkies or whatever. But RFK is coming for your Twinkies. We all know that. RFK looks like he was carved out of a mountain. He looks like a piece of craggly rock. He looks like 50s man. Of course you've noticed this, because that's what he looks like. Also, I'm coming for your Twinkies. Stop talking like me. Why is he trying to talk like me? He talks like me after I've eaten too many Twinkies. Also, RFK on that plane with the fellas eating the McDonald's, I thought that was cool because I wanted that $5 meal. Well, guess what? Did you see the statement that Big Jelly put out about RFK? Did you see that? They said RFK wants to ban our food, but nothing will stop Americans' insatiable appetite for snacks. Nothing. And Big Jelly will keep on rolling. You can put warning labels on Uncrustables all you want. You can put pictures of human carcasses on the front of an Uncrustable, and people will still buy them because we love our chemicals in this country. Signed, Bud Smucker. Did you know that? Did you know that the head of Big Pyramid is Bud Smucker? Did you know that? Bud Smucker and Marion Nestle. Marion Nestle owns Big Water. And guess what? They're right. Nothing will stop the insatiable appetite for blood sugar. It will keep rolling. They control everything. And when he said that, I went out and bought 4 Twinkies. And I ate all 4 of them today, and I love them. Twinkies are great. I love Twinkies. Can I say that? I love Twinkies. I think the Twinkie is great. I had a Twinkie in my closet. I kept it in my closet. I kept it there since 1997. And I was thinking about the 311 album. So, I was thinking, 1997. So I went in to go find my 311 album, and I found a Twinkie. Guess what? It looked beautiful. It looked spongy. Like I want a bed made of a Twinkie. And it's just spongy and comfortable. So I unwrapped it, and I was hit with the beautiful aroma of syrup and I ate it, and I felt alive. I felt alive again, because I've been trying to drink water. We was at the mall the other day with my bitch, one of them. Why are you drinking water? I tried to drink water, and I sneezed so hard that my rib dislocated. I'm not kidding. And I felt ill. My body was rejecting water. So I almost just lit my mustache on fire right there. I probably did. But that's okay, because big tobacco also is great. It's great. And also, big, look, man, I can stand for a lot of things, but don't come and take it. Come and take it. That's what I say. But also, he's a nice man. I like him. I think he's a nice fellow. I'll give up Twinkies. I don't think Twinkies are that good. I don't really want to eat one anymore. Now that I'm thinking about them, though, they really are good. So, the drown world. Yeah, mind buffering. Overhead, the sky was an immense funnel of sapphire and purple, fantasticated whorls of coral cloud marking the descent of the sun like baroque vapor trails. This book is hypnotic. It's hypnotically beautiful. The deep twilight bower of the auditorium and its strange zodiac. I suppose the man's called Strangman. He's a strange man. Would say that the suicide should never return to the scene of his crime. Were the day of judgment to come, the armies of the dead would probably rise clothed in the same filthy mantle towards a pantheon which held so many of the terrors and enigmas. And then we enter the time zone at the very end. This is the inner zone. The end of this book has an apotheosis, like a real apotheosis in this, where he sort of melds back into deep time and landscape. As the tremendous roar of the explosion lifted up into the dark sky, the immense fountain of erupting foam and silt briefly illuminated the terrace, outlining Cortez's spread eagle forum. From an initial crescendo, the noise seemed to mount in continuous sustained rumble, the breaking thunder of the shockwave yielding to the low rush of the bursting cataract. Clods of silt and torn vegetation spattered on the tiles around Karen's, and he stumbled to his feet and reached the rail. Widening as he watched, the water jetted down into the open streets below, carrying with it huge sections of the silt bank. There was a concerted rush to the deck of the depot ship, a dozen arms pointing up to the water pouring out of the breach. It swilled into the square, only a few feet deep, blotting out the fires and splashing against the hull of the ship, still rocking slightly from the impact of the explosion. South, Karen said, softly listening to the roar of the deepening water towards the sun. You'll be with me, Beatrice. Far to her right, rising up above the encompassing silt banks, were the other familiar landscapes he knew so well, even the green roof of the Ritz, fading into the haze. At last, all he could see were the isolated letters of the giant slogan Strangman's men had painted, looming out of the darkness over the flat water like a concluding epitaph. Time zone. And then at the end here, he says, half asleep, he lay back thinking of the events of the past years that had culminated in their arrival at the central lagoons and launched him into his neuronic odyssey and a Strangman as his insane alligators. And finally, with a deep pang of regret and affection, holding her memory clearly before his mind as long as he could of Beatrice and her quickening smile. At last, he tied the crutch to his leg again, and with the butt of the empty 45 scratched on the wall below the window, sure that no one would ever read the message, 27th day. Have rested and am moving south. All is well, Karen's. So he left the lagoon and entered the jungle again. Within a few days, was completely lost, following the lagoon southward through the increasing rain and heat, attacked by alligators and giant bats. A second Adam searching for the forgotten paradises of the reborn sun. It's pretty wild. It's a pretty wild book. I really recommend it. I really recommend J.G. Ballard because his books are the complete opposite. They are the total opposite of the complete opposite of the science fiction that we normally think of. Science fiction is great, and fantasy is great, especially for escapism. But the J.G. Ballard science fiction books are telling you that you can't escape. You can't escape what humanity is and what people have made for themselves, and how and this book is crazy because most of J.G. Ballard's books have this kind of bleak future where people are searching for meaning in order to figure out themselves, but it's gray. Everything's gray. And so here we have something that is completely colorized. It's spectral. It's hypercolor. And they still do this. But they don't find meaning. They can't find meaning because they don't know what meaning means. I'm going to show you a clip if I can pull it up here. Of course, this. I don't have ad blocker on this. I'm on StreamYard. I have to show it on this because on this window, and I don't have ad blocker on this, and I do on my other account, but I can't show this here, so it's really annoying. So if there's an ad, I'll try to skip through it. I hate it when ads come up. But I want to show you this one interview that J.G. Ballard did, which is this is great. He's talking about science fiction here, and see, I'm going to try and find you the specific clips. Let me pull this up. Yeah. I'm going to try and pull this up here. Hold on a second. Please don't be an ad. If it'll even play. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, let me pull this up for you guys. I'm so bad at presenting things on here. Okay, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. I want to show you this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's go here. Okay. Hopefully his perfectly pretentious voice is amazing, but it's what's funny about this is that he's just an Englishman. It's not. I think of all people, so I usually say, don't. It doesn't. You can watch interviews with artists, and it's interesting to listen to them, especially for what they say about their about art in general, whether it's literature or film. Have you guys seen? Side note, have you guys seen the Rogan interview with Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery? I thought it was fantastic. I really liked it. I can listen to Quentin Tarantino talk about movies forever. He's so good. He's one of these rare guys who talks about films in a way that I think appeals to people like us. Scorsese kind of used to be like this, but Scorsese gets to, and then I was watching the Red Balloon, and then when I watched the Red Balloon, I said to myself, well, that's just like the 1960s, and it's just too much. But Tarantino, who really does have this Tarantino, I mean, he has this infectious sort of way of talking about films, but I like the way that he talks about films because he's right. He's right most of the time. So he had this part where he's talking about, there's one segment in it where he's talking about the difference between films and television. And it is great. It is really good. He says, and he makes a great point. He's kind of like me. It takes a long time to get there, but he's like, so the difference between television and film is that, and the core difference is that when you watch a television series, and we went through the renaissance of television, we went through this in the late 2000s through 2017 or something like that. There was a lot of great television. It was because of the streaming services. When they first started, they really had some great things, but then the streaming services, they got too much. This is like a studio getting too much money and too much power and too much all-encompassing, ubiquitous canvassing of the cultural landscape. And then we saw that the end of this was really, what's his face? Nicholas Winding Refn's Too Old to Die Young to me is kind of like the end of the television cinematic platform, because he used Amazon Prime to finance this 10-hour long film, right? It's a television series, but it does what they think is explores the space. It's really a slow burn. It fits him, but it's like the end. That's the end. There now, television is what Tarantino says is all soap opera. It's all just melodrama. So instead of having characters who we are interested in, whether they're good or bad, we're interested in who they are and what they do. We're interested in the overall, the narrative and the plot. The film drives you towards something, but instead of having human emotions and conflicts and love, characters talk about emotions and love. That it's something that they talk about. It's kind of like, instead of being in love, we have people talking about one day I'll find love. That is not human to me. What do you mean one day you'll find love? You can find the love of crack. You can find the love of your love of movies. That's not love. You mean a person with whom you'll fall in love, or one day you'll have the ability to give love to someone you care about. You'll have the ability to show love. You'll receive love or a sense of self by giving, right? You'll serve. That's what love is. Characters in films, they're much more comprehensive about showing that in terms of the film format. But he said that when you watch a television show, and he uses Yellowstone as an example, and I agree with him about this with Yellowstone. This is why I stopped watching Yellowstone. I watched the first season. I couldn't watch it anymore because the conflicts are superficial. They are the interpersonal conflicts between characters that we stop caring about it. So he says, when I watch the show, I'm interested in it and engrossed, but when I leave, if 5 years go by, I forget about who the villain was. I forget what the conflict was. In Yellowstone that Kevin Costner is the patriarch of his family, and he wants to keep his family going and have power and property. And, they drop the people off on that long black train. But so what? Because it never ends. There's no payoff, he says. There's no payoff. In a film, we get everything. In a great film, we get everything economical. So we have the release, like in a classical tragedy, we should leave in a tragedy full of pity and terror. We pity the tragic hero and his downfall, but we are also full of terror at the events that have happened and about the future after the story's over and about what it means for ourselves. But in television series and shows, we mainly don't get that. We just have characters with ideology. So Ballard here is great because he's saying the same sort of thing about popular fiction, and he's going to go on to talk about why his version of science fiction is totally different from the normal way of looking at science fiction. But he says science fiction is probably more true than the way that artists continue to make books. Is he not right? Is he not right? And was this the early 70s? So 1977, late 70s. 77, the year Son of Sam. The year of Berkowitz. The year of the Sex Pistols. No, but he's right. He's totally right about computers. And what is interesting about this, I think, is that, again, I covered that movie Y2K last weekend and for the members. And I think it's a great movie. I think it's very funny, and it's it's fun for a nostalgic. It was made not for. It wasn't made for people younger than me, and it wasn't made for people older than me. It was just made for people my age, I think, or around my age, because it's full of this sort of nostalgic whimsy, which is fine. But it's self-consciously cheap, and it's funny. It's not trying to be anything more than it is. But it just made me consider that in the 90s, everything in the future was the information superhighway. The internet is going to transform everyone's lives. We will live online. And they were right about that eventually in a number of ways. Everything we do is interfaced with this invisible computer stream. I'm here right now talking to you on it. But in the 90s, I thought this is total bullshit. I will never care about this. This is incredibly lame. I don't care about getting on my computer instead of going out at night or whatever. When I had to do research at school or go to a library, I did those things. That makes me sound so old, but I did those things. I didn't want to get on the internet. And the only reason I like to get on the internet was to look up Hotler facts and to read about conspiracy theories. That's it. And that was cool. I like doing that. Look, I pulled up a list. I found a webpage the other day. I was looking for, I can't believe I found it, but I was looking for the other name of the monarch victim who testified about being a MK Delta Montauk super soldier. And it's not Kathy O'Brien. So I looked it up and I found it. I found it on a message board, and it had been restored. And then it also had a link to this document of every single monarch programmer and every single program. And this isn't, Search for the Manchurian Candidate, like the book. This was like a comprehensive schizo list. And it was from like 1997. And I can't believe it's still up. It's so incredible. It has names and addresses of monarch programmers. That's cool. That's all the internet was. That's what I spent my time on with the internet. And I did spend a lot of time on that, and then I would go home and talk and look on AOL and read my email, Shockwave 67, now gone. And I would talk to my friends on instant messenger when I got home until my mom picked up the phone, or my sister, and I heard the connection cut off. But I had a kid's line. I had my own phone line. And then that's what we ran the internet on. So then I had to get off that so I could call my friend Logan and say, hey, Smashing Pumpkins is live in Chicago right now on MTV. And they don't have Jimmy Chamberlain because because him and his friend, his friend OD'd on heroin and died, RIP. That's unfortunate. And now they got this new drummer, and it's all electronic, and everybody's going to hate this, but I think it's pretty cool. And he said, how are you watching this? And I said, I don't know. I'm not supposed to be. It's a school night. And then he still says that to me. Every time I say you should, I send him a clip, and he says, it's a school night. I can't watch this. And then I would get back on the internet, and I would look up you and Cameron and facts about Leon DeGrelle. That's what the internet was. But now everything is invisible. And, it puts into perspective the power grid, obviously, because look, man, I've said this before, and I'm totally dialed in. I'm like 11 level psychic. I sent to my group chat a parody of myself as Chad Smithson, my Gilman School lacrosse player, friend of Wario or whatever. They should have sent Wario if they were going to do that. And then the next day I see on the TV a thing about the Duke lacrosse players. So I'm dialed in. You just pull this stuff out of the atmosphere. But, if the power grid went down right? It would be because one reason would be because the propane station is the propane making factory is literally right next door to the power transformer on that right off the highway over here. It's right next door. So and the whole city shut down because a guy was on a speedball and was driving his Ford Taurus and drove straight into a small power station at 9 a.m. a couple years ago, and the power went off in the city for like a week. So we're fucked. And if that happened, right? If that happened, then and the phones went off and the power went off, nobody knows how to turn on the power. Nobody knows how to turn on a phone. I don't know how a phone works. I don't know how it works. I just carry around this little Stanley Kubrick device and I press a number. Also, I hate the fact that phones, I hate the fact that you have to hold a phone like this. That annoys me. Like, remember when you open it, clamshells were good, like the Motorola Razr, okay, or the Nokia was great because you hold the Nokia and it's like there's just numbers, but you can't. There's no way that you can accidentally press the screen and then end up calling, your boss or something. Which is, I'm always terrified of that. Aren't you? I could put my finger on this thing and it, the old OBS app will open up on the phone, and now I'm streaming. And I'm like, I'm just trying to eat a Twinkie in the kitchen. I didn't mean to live stream this. I'm terrified of it happening all the time. Right. And it's all deleted anyway. So that's what that is. Right. Yeah, it's not so bad. I mean, it's not so bad. You're right. It's not so bad, but I don't know how this works. You carry around this. How did we make this fucking thing? What nerd was sitting around and was like, oh, I'm gonna, what is silicone? What is that? Some guy was digging around in the dirt and found some stones and some dirt and was like, oh, I can make this into a square. And then I carve laser beams into it. And that is a chip. And then I put the chip in this thing and then I solder it or whatever. And now I can call you. I don't know how that works. I don't really care. I mean, that's, I don't know. Yeah. I don't put app icons on the home screen. My home screen is a picture of Papa Ewok, and that's it. And he says, I'm not the king of conspiracy. I'm the king of reality. But I'm saying, I don't know how that works. And everything is, the 5G is trust the experts, right? These two are, this is a time. This was a simpler time. This is a time when you could turn on the television and you could come home, you could turn on the television. You didn't have to curate your own shit. You could turn on the television and you have J.G. Ballard on at night with these 70s microphones, just in a regular suit, talking to this mama right here in her green. She looks like the woman in Clockwork Orange. And you've got these hideous, melted, surrealistic paintings of hell behind you and this shag carpet full of cigarette butts and cut up Coke and bourbon, right? And that was a time. That was a time. Now, there are bad times along with that. Look, my final year in grad school in Belfast, there was no Bluetooth. Obviously, that was definitely not around. This isn't that long ago. There was no Bluetooth. There was no Wi-Fi. I had a Dell laptop, which was totally melted down because of LimeWire trying to download the latest fucking Big Pun song, right? Which was shit anyway. And I had a DVD of the season 1 of Seinfeld and Donnie Darko. That's all. So then I had a television, and then they said, you got to get a license for that. But whatever. And I had 4 channels, and it was, I can't tell you how amazing it is to be on a ground floor flat on Mount Charles in Belfast at 3 a.m. and, have these these spidey bastards walking past at night, coming back from the pub, sniffing glue, and you're right in your bag full of glue and drinking White Lightning. Fuck off, right? And you're in your room and you turn on the television and Lost comes on. That was awesome. I was like, oh, Lost. But then it was all shit like this, which is great, but there wasn't that much. But when you get it, it's pretty good.
Well, my qualifications are that I'm living in 1977.
Yeah. Tell her ass, dude. What other qualification do you need? What fucking qualification do you need? Right. Yeah, the Bluetooth rune existed. It didn't, the Bluetooth rune existed. My book that I want to get published is called Runes. Did you know that? It's my book of poems on the Third Reich, megalomania, Imperial Rome, and Troubles era paramilitaries, which I've read from. But yeah, then Lost ended. So, but he, tell her what qualification. I'm a writer. I live in 1977. Qualifications. What qualifications do you have? But, I've always thought of science fiction writers as having full of nutcases, if you will. The way she leans on the sofa right there. I've always thought of these people as sort of half here, they with their motorways and their, she does have a point because the old school. Shouts out to the people that went to the science fiction places in the old days. That I didn't do that, but that was pretty cool. Our friend Jerry has an awesome picture in a Spock shirt, talking to Spock. Right, that's sick, dude. Jerry's like 14. Walking through Buffalo in a Spock shirt, going to the science fiction thing, and he was based as fuck, and he is. So, William F. Buckley. Have you ever seen the William F. Buckley interviews? Of course you have. William F. Buckley talking in a Mid-Atlantic accent about, isn't it true that the CIA is helping us? Well, why do you continue to state in your fiction that there are these things that happen in the world? Can't you just accept it?
Well, there's one that's taking place.
Corvinal's like, I don't know, but I think you need to shut your mouth. Prescient, even though he's talking about the present time in the 70s with Trekkie conventions, it's prescient because he's talking about LARPing, and now this is everywhere. This is just everyone, and that really is truly what postmodernism is. We've reached the end zone of what it means to have a self, right? You hear people. These people discussing that they have no interior monologue. What do you mean? You walk around talking to yourself? Well, yes, but that's besides the point. There's no conscience. Like there's no conscience anymore. It's just, satiate your passions and put on your tail. That's what he's predicting here.
Futuristic jousting, extravagant. I mean,
I gotta say, I don't like Doctor Who. I never have. If you like Doctor Who, that's great, but I don't like Doctor Who. I never have liked Doctor Who, and I live there. I don't like Doctor. I didn't like that Doctor Who is called Doctor Who. That messes with my head. I don't like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean his last name's Who? Are you talking about? I don't like that. And this isn't a bit. I don't like Doctor Who. I don't like the theremin music. I like theremins, and I don't like the. I'm like, what is this? It's been on since the fucking 40s or some shit. Is he in outer space or not? And why has he got a scarf on? Why is the scarf weird? I don't like that. I don't get it. The main reason I don't like it is because they should have. My teacher at drama school, John Hartock, should have been Doctor Who. He looked like Doctor Who. He looked like a Hobbit and Doctor Who, and he trained Daniel Day-Lewis. And I'm like, I don't know what Doctor Who is, but you should have been it. If he had been in it, then I would have liked it. But I don't get why the Doctor Who's they get are always they look different. What do you mean? This one guy is tall and skinny. How's the next guy a short little fat man? It's not even the same looking person. I don't understand that. I don't get that. But if you like Doctor Who and it's engrossing, then I'm glad that you found it. I really am. I'm glad that you found it. It's great to find a thing. I'm always looking for the next thing. I love J.T. Ballard. I love his fiction. I could read everyone. I ordered another one of his books, and it said coming Tuesday. If you don't get it by Tuesday, then get a refund. And now it's Friday, and then it just got lost. Like it doesn't even say it's lost. It just got lost in Factory Zone. So that's the end of that. But I'll go to the used bookstore. I'll go to an actual place and get one. I'll go to an actual place and get one if you all can help me by supporting me if you want to. I would appreciate that. That would be really good. I still, by the way, have to talk about Neuromancer. Shouts out to Circle G who sent me this. Got to talk about it now. We're still going to talk about Neuromancer. And that's, he nails it. Now, he's not talking about like you. He's not talking about you if you like science fiction. I like science fiction as much as anybody else. And he writes science fiction, but he's talking about what has become now. He's talking about people that their religion is science, and science is the study of God's creation. When he says it gives them a hold over with gigantic powers over the world, it's people who would say that they want to have agency in the world, and you're watching Marvel movies, seeing your worldview in Marvel, and that's not only it. And now it's a marvel that exists to them, and that is their world. And the Marvel movies have changed because it continues this self-reflexive exercise in futility. Right? That's it. He's fucking funny, man. He is. He's right. Look at her. She's like, I can't believe it. Whatever do you mean? I'm wearing a green wig. They are, but he's funny because he's right. Dude, people live in Star Wars apartments. Now, look, I've always thought it would be cool. My friend and I always said, all right, first thing I'm going to do when I get rich is I'm going to have a tabletop Miss Pac-Man machine. That'll be my dinner table. And I'm going to have Han Solo frozen in carbonite on the wall. But I was 17. It still would be pretty cool, but only because, Pac-Man is cool, like to play, but it takes up space, and then I'd have to go sell it to that dude in Scott's Edition I was talking about that fixes Pac-Man machines, and he would charge me $3,000 for it, and dude, what are you talking about? Clean the dust out of this thing. And then he's like, well, I need money for my PCP, or whatever, man. I mean, but he's talking about how people live in a Target, right? They live in Walmart. This is what Jay talked about all those years ago, right? Pope of the future. Well, the future's here, and that's it. It's over. But it's not. And I think that's wonderful that people that is what they choose in their life. But if you are that human baby man that made your house into a giant crib, and you go, Mama, you go, where, need Milky, and you put out an ad on Craigslist for a milker who can put a baby bottle full of fentanyl for you because you're a human baby man. How do you live? How does this guy make money? How does he pay his rent? What is he doing? Because he didn't even have. TikTok didn't even exist. What was he doing? How did he live in a human baby apartment? His whole apartment is a crib. How did he do that? I don't want to know. I don't care. He also discusses how England had pillars of society on which people could rely. How the monarchy, the monarchy, the church, systems on which we could rely, and now everything has torn itself apart and has become anti-human, or has superseded that into this consumerist hellscape where people are products and everything becomes quantified. And that is the end point of this. It's to be expected. But what he's talking about here, especially, is how his view of Asia was such when he was a child. So he's not really looking at his purview of the geopolitical Pangea that takes place. That's outside of his observational paradigm. He's not looking at that. He's looking at how an individual fits into the atmosphere and how the cultural shifting has taken place. And now they won the war, but lost the Great War, if that makes sense. I'm not sure he liked what happened with the big 1963 event. I think it's that when he says it was tremendously liberating, I think he's talking about in terms of, especially in terms of of artistically. So, and in terms of what he mentioned in contrast with coming back to England post-war. So, and this is fine. I mean, it's like you come back and everything's blitzed and gray, and the 1963 event was the John F. Kennedy event, and the 1960s were born. We've talked about before about how the 1960s were born not just out of the JFK event, but they were also born out of, I think, the Fidel Castro appearance on Ed Sullivan, right, which Tom Wolfe covers in what is it? Radical Chic and Mau Mau and the Flatcatchers. How, and this really is, postmodernism starts in 1945 with the nuclear weapon. And then we have this new era of so-called, of liberation, right, which exists in the 60s, but there's color, it's like colorized. So in swinging 60s, everything gets colorized and there's a new cultural era. And he's saying that it was liberate. I mean, that's when he published his book. His first book was published in 1962, right before this. So his art, his writing it becomes illustrated by the world around him. And I think that Ballard is great because he is not a weather vane. He's not just going along with events happening now in the contemporary sense, but he is predictive of the way that they look in an artistic vision, and certainly the way that they look now. Let me see what it says about. He's talking about food here. I'm going to move on here because I need to start talking about William Gibson and Neuromancer, and I wanted to show you, if I can find it, this interview with William Gibson talking about the internet here. William Gibson, who was lived in Virginia, and here's a cyberpunk. There it is. William Gibson on the dawn of the internet. So William Gibson was living in Virginia. I think he lives in Vancouver now. And this book right here, Neuromancer, it's the same in terms of the drowned world, because even though the exterior world becomes Johnny Mnemonic, it is about the inner zone and the inner space of what it means to live in a completely quantumized world. And he is one of the harbingers of the internet. He wrote this before the internet, and this is the book is The Matrix. This is The Matrix. This and Baudrillard are what influenced The Matrix, and he writes a fantastic book, which is hypnotic in a different sense. It's like Neuromancer is hypnotic in a different way. It's hypnotic in the way that we can look at the computer screen for an entire day and not move, right? You just become hypnotized by the waveform. And the poetry of the book is also fantastic. It's a difficult book to read. Neuromancer is a difficult book to read because it's like reading a foreign language. It's you become so ensconced in this new language that you're wondering like what's happened. You're wondering where we're going with this. There's so many characters and there's so much going on. Case is a hacker essentially who is living in Chiba City and gets co-opted by a corporate criminal syndicate, and he has his nerve system jacked with what's the movie Escape from LA style mini like nanothermite. So he's got a time limit on what he can on hacking into the system and finding out about the AI that has, whether it's become sentient or not, and hacking into it and doing the bidding of this guy. And the characters shift. We see that some characters are like avatars for others. We read the book Snow Crash, and that is where we get Avatar. This book is where we get Matrix and Cyberpunk. So here he is talking about the dawn of the internet. And we skip the ad because I don't have an ad blocker on this one. If you'll play. In a second, I'm going to get up and get another drink. Why am I buffering? Why won't you play? What are you doing? See, this is it. This is the internet. This is the internet now because, everything's going to be so great in the future. And you go to self-checkout and it doesn't work. And then you order books and they don't work. I mean, that's it.
Find them up, let them loose, and see what they do. There is some potential. There is some basis for believing that a really talented and determined 15-year-old can create a website in his bedroom that's a more entertaining environment than something a multinational entertainment conglomerate might come up with. And in fact, that happens rather consistently. The good ones tend to be put together by kids, and the ones put together by major corporations are rather dull and behind the curve. At the same time, it doesn't matter how fast your modem is if you're being shelled by ethnic separatists. I mean, there's a limit. There's a limit to what this sort of technology can do for you personally.
It depends where you are. In the sense.
It depends where you are. Although there are a number of things that actually do seem to level the playing field. Since the internet is post-geographical, you can put your web.
That accent, by the way, that accent is, you could tell he lived in Virginia. That it's post. It's a little bit post. It's not quite. I was going down to the river. But it is a bit Virginian. But also, I googled, was William Gibson on Speedballs? And the answer was yes.
Website up from Idaho and still reach the same audience. It really isn't dependent at all on where you are, except for the clarity and bandwidth of your telephone service.
Who do you think are the primary beneficiaries then of this? Is it ideas people? Is it a slightly reassuring picture of people? Well, I don't know, like yourself or creative people gaining the reins of power in the way that they could never do before?
I can't see why it won't become completely ubiquitous. I think that what we're seeing now, we're still in a phase where personal computation is a sort of middle class pastime. But I think, given the market forces driving the computer industry, we'll see it spread through the whole society. I mean, it should fairly soon. I think it would evolve into something that would like something like that would be like television in the extent that it penetrates every level of society.
There you go.
And in a way, I'm slightly surprised to hear you say that, because one of the things that I associate with you is somebody.
One of the things that Ballard talked about was that he could see a future where computers would rule the world and people would have a television screen. 1984 was one of the most striking things about 1984 was Orwell's ability to see through Big Brother, the Big Brother apparatus, that we would not be watching television, but that it would be watching us. And now that sounds like duh, right? But this was one of the things that really came out of, Prism and Bill Binney and all this, which was that, and a lot of people, especially boomers, have not like caught on to this, that they still talk about, like, was he wired? Was he wired? Well, everyone's wired, right? We carry around a video camera and a microphone everywhere we go. We even put it next to our head when we sleep. And not only that, but the house can be used as a receiver to heat up my brain pan because I'm a TI. And I've been told to go wander around and stand halfway in the street light at night and look for laser pyramids that come out of the New Jersey drones. But this is the thing about 1984 was that you're being judged on your social credit, on your reaction to and you're a data farm. I mean, it's like with the Pokemon thing, the Pokemon and the ancestry thing is not wild. Who didn't know? I mean, look, if people didn't know that and they wanted to figure out their ancestry, or they wanted to, verify, that all this stuff, that's fine. That's cool. People do that. That's cool. But it's also like you're taking a blood sample of yourself or whatever and sending it off to some company. It got to a point where it was obvious that this is nefarious, I guess. And it's like, but there's no escape. It doesn't matter if you didn't do that. If you didn't do that, it doesn't make you more based by not doing that, because that's everywhere. That's it. We just went through a thing 4 years ago where everybody was getting that every day to go to work or some shit. Right? That's everywhere. Like my laptop has a thumbprint thing on it. So, that's one of the things that comes out of 1984. And Ballard talked about how basically people would be live streaming their life. And that's, we went through IRL live streamers and stuff, and that's cool. That's a performance thing. And that's pretty funny. But that is also on a micro level. That's not only TikTok, but that's FaceTime and everything. And I'm not saying there are good things that come out of this, but they're just saying that is a different world. That's a different world. And William Gibson is saying that the entire world is going to become like this. It's totally connected like this. Connected until it's disconnected, until the connection is the disconnection.
He famously wrote about, came up with the idea of cyberspace on an old portable Hemingway typewriter, rather than whatever was the state of the art in. Well, there wasn't a great deal.
Yes, but people do forget that there was no state of the art in personal computing when I wrote Neuromancer, and that's why I was using a typewriter. Neuromancer and the first Macintosh were released in the same year, and someone told me recently in the same month. That's difficult for young people to imagine. I know. But I didn't know anyone that had a personal computer.
I understood that in a sense what you were talking about is that the power there was the power of the imagination, not the power of the machine.
When I wrote Neuromancer, there was effectively no internet to extrapolate from. I made it up. The cyberspace I made up isn't being used in Neuromancer in the way that we're using the internet today. In Neuromancer, it's all corporate, and a few cybernetic car thieves are skulking through it attempting to steal tidbits of information. People aren't using it to exchange recipes with their relatives in West Germany. People aren't using it personally. And in my later work, I've had to deal with what the internet has become.
Right.
So I think that accounts for the difference.
So that's crazy, because I mean that is really predicting, the beginning of Facebook, right? And that's the reason that people were on Facebook. That's the reason I got on Facebook when it first started, was because I wanted to keep in contact with all of my friends worldwide. I had a lot of friends. I lived all over the world, and it was an easy way for me to talk to people, because you didn't have to pay for a long distance international card to call people. So that was pretty cool. And then I noticed that, pretty quickly, that as soon as people started, it just became garbage. It just was like, it's just technological garbage. And then I spent all of my time on Facebook going to my friends lists and going through their friends list and blocking every single person in their friends list, and then blocking the next people. I mean, when I finally got off Facebook, I had blocked like 33,000 people. So I'm like, my OCD is in overdrive here. And I'm not saying that as a term that's like, I have OCD. Oh, my house has OCD. I'm talking real, because I got obsessed with making sure that I didn't want I'm on that's the great irony. I'm on this thing, but I didn't want any of these people to know about me personally. I didn't want them to see me. Right. Put me on some list. So then that's it. That was over. And he's talking about how in Neuromancer, the people they live in a world where technology is not only ubiquitous, but the neural link is completely ingrained in how you think. So the great thing about Neuromancer is that it has the Ballard thing element of neuronic time, where your sleep and your dreams are affected by the exterior world, and you can't tell the difference between dreams and reality, man. But the outer world becomes a surrealistic dreamscape. Well, in Neuromancer, all they do is it's like you're not only dreaming about phones, you're dreaming in the world. You can't get any more real than being jacked in to the Matrix. So this is what affected the Matrix. So the Matrix is like, everything has become Ballard world mixed with total science fiction, but now you don't have any meaning except for being jacked in to cyberspace.
What the internet has become is as much a surprise to me as the collapse of the Soviet Union was. Those are, definitely two things I didn't foresee about the future.
Do you feel that we should fear the power of this technology, or should we embrace it? I mean, are there fears that you feel personally about the power it has to change the way?
Well, I think we should respect the power of technology and try to fear it in a rational way, because the chances are, with any given technology, once it's introduced, it's not going to go away. The only reason it ever goes away is if there turns out to be no market for it. And that's a major part of what I do in my work, is try to envision.
All right, so he says, the book begins, the sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel. It's gray. It's gray, and you live in fuzz world. The Japanese had already forgotten more neurosurgery than the Chinese ever had. It says the black clinics of Chiba were the cutting edge, whole bodies of techniques supplanted monthly, and still they couldn't repair the damage he'd suffered in that Memphis hotel. A year A year here, and he still dreamed of cyberspace, hope fading nightly. All the speed he took, all the turns he'd taken, and the corners he'd cut in Night City, and still he'd see the Matrix in his sleep, bright lattices of logic unfolding across the colorless void. The sprawl was a long, strange way home over the Pacific now, and he was no console man, no cyberspace cowboy, just another hustler trying to make it through. But the dreams came on in the Japanese night like live wire voodoo, and he'd cry for it, cry in his sleep, and wake alone in the dark, curled in his capsule in some coffin hotel, his hands clawed into the bed slab, temper foam bunched between his fingers, trying to reach the console that wasn't there. This is addiction. It's addiction. This is heroin addiction to the computer. Case fell into the prison of his own flesh, it says on page 6. On page 7, it says, Tokyo Bay was a black expanse where gulls wheeled above drifting shoals of white styrofoam. The 2 blocks west of the Chat, in a tea shop called the Jarre, Case washed down the night's first pill with a double espresso. It was a flat pink octagon, a potent species of Brazilian Dex he bought from one of the Zone's girls. The Jarre was walled with mirrors, each panel framed in red neon. This is synthwave. It's total synthwave. And what happens is when he goes through this operation, Elysium style, you remember you've seen Elysium, he gets a Dex blocker, which is sort of like an opioid blocker in terms of how his body can't be affected by it, and now he is jacked into cyberspace. God, the language of this is so good. The prototypes of the programs you use to crack industrial banks were developed for Screaming Fist. This is a paramilitary program. For the assault on the Kerensky computer nexus, basic module was a Nightwing microlight, a pilot, a matrix deck, a jockey. We were running a virus called Mole. The Mole series was the first generation of real intrusion programs. ICE, the book becomes about ICE. Intrusion countermeasures electronics. I was there, Case. I was there when they invented your kind. What would you say if I told you we could correct your neural damage, Case? Armitage becomes he's an avatar. Armitage suddenly looked to Case as if he were carved from a block of metal, inert, enormously heavy, a status. He knew now that this was a dream and that soon he'd wake. Armitage wouldn't speak again. Case's dreams always ended in these freeze frames, and now this one was over. His dreams become electronic. Lost, so small, amid the dark. Let's see, it says, cold steel odor, ice caressed his spine. Where the sky faded from hissing static to the non-color of the Matrix, and he glimpsed the shuriken, his stars. He carries a throwing star. It's like a vaporwave throwing star. The Matrix had its roots in, this is page 56 of the book, the Matrix had its roots in primitive arcade games, in early graphics programs and military experimentation with cranial jacks. On the Sony, a two-dimensional space war faded behind a forest of mathematically generated ferns, demonstrating the spatial possibilities of logarithmic spirals. Cold blue military footage burned through. Lab animals wired into test systems. Helmets feeding into fire control circuits of tanks and warplanes. Cyberspace, he coined the word. This is also Polybius. Remember that Polybius was the vector tank game that was the CIA op put into the arcade that they used for wargaming. Says consensual cyberspace, a consensual hallucination experienced daily by billions of legitimate operators in every nation by children being taught mathematical concepts, a graphic representation of data abstracted from the banks of every computer in the human system. And in the blood-lit dark behind his eyes, silver phosphenes boiling in from the edge of space, hypnagogic images jerking past like film compiled from random frames, symbols, figures, faces, a blurred, fragmented mandala of visual information. My old AP English teacher, Ron Smith, once told us, he said, you know what's worse than sleepwalking, and what's worse than sleep paralysis is hypnagogic hallucination. Hypnagogic hallucination is when you go to sleep and all you see is televised digital white light that blinds you and you're frozen. There's always a point at which the terrorist ceases to manipulate the media gestalt, a point at which the violence may well escalate, but beyond which the terrorist has become symptomatic of the media gestalt itself. Terrorism, as we ordinarily understand it, is innately media related. The Panther moderns differ from other terrorists precisely in their degree of self-consciousness, in the awareness of the extent to which media divorce the act of terrorism from the original socio-political intent. This book is full of all of these different archetypes of the neo-digital world. So Case is the neo-hacker, neo-media matrix-style hacker, and he falls in love with this woman who protects him. It's like in Johnny Mnemonic. He jacks into the system with a cranial drive, and he's a hacker carrying encoded information in his DNA and his spinal column, as mentioned in Ballard, with the neuronic time descending down his spinal column. And the girlfriend that he gets has these mirror shades as body mods in her eyeballs. She has night vision, and she's got razor blades under her fingernails. She kind of protect her, and the story becomes a bit about love. The character, they don't have a concept of love. There's no love. There's no everything metaphysical, everything abstract becomes physicalized in the digital world. Everything is there for you, and the character is lost because everything that they try to supplant their sensations with, first of all, with a digital presence and their awareness and participation in the matrix, but they also are burned out on speed and speedballs. So one of the characters, Johnny Riviera, is a speedball addict. There's like this Chiba heroin, and there's the screaming fist cocaine, and they're on Dexedrine, and sort of a melding of drugs that take place in these octagonal of future pharma pills, and that gives them the sensation of being alive, but also of fading away. And there's even there's a terrorist group in the book that is full of like the last Christians on earth, because this stuff everything's poison. They want to get rid of all this poison. Grievous Angel, Blue Nine Mainline says, yeah, they're called Sons of Christ the King. It's a satellite. There's a Ra's al Ghul sort of character. It says obscure subsect of militant Christian fundamentalists had just taken credit for having introduced clinical levels of an outlawed psychoactive agent known as Blue 9 into the ventilation system of the SenseNet pyramid. Blue 9, known in California as Grievous Angel, had been shown to produce acute paranoia and homicidal psychosis in 85% of experimental subjects. This Batman Begins. This is Ra's al Ghul. There's so much in this book. One of the characters, is it Johnny Riviera, who's taking a mixture of cocaine and meperidine? Meperidine is Demerol. He's a speedball artist. With the city drenched in pre-dawn blue. God, this is the book is frenetic. Eventually, they come across a program called Wintermute, and then finally Neuromancer. Holograms twisted and shuddered on the roaring of the games, ghosts overlapping in the crowded haze of the place, a smell of sweat and bored tension. Yeah, here's Deep Time. This is Ballard, but it's William Gibson. Page 232. She dreamed of a state involving very little in the way of individual consciousness. 3 Jane was saying. 3 Jane is the woman who's, I guess she inherits the full-on corporation that owns the SenseNet, that owns the AI system, and there are a number of people, but she's after Case to get to him before he can hack into the code to determine to find the AI and its sentience. She cupped a large cameo in her hand, extending it toward Molly. Molly is the girl that he's in love with. The carved profile was very much like her own. Animal bliss. I think she viewed the evolution of the forebrain as a sort of sidestep. She withdrew the brooch and studied it, tilting it to catch the light at different angles. Only in, wrote over my book here, only, let's see, clan members. Molly nodded. Case remembered the injection. What had they given her? The pain was still there, but it came through as a tight focus of scrambled impressions. Neon worms writhing in her thigh, the touch of burlap, smell of frying krill. His mind recoiled from it. He avoided focusing on it. The impressions overlapped, became a sensory equivalent of white noise. White Noise was published the same year this was. Isn't that crazy? That's fucking crazy, dude. 1984 is 1984, and the Mac, and White Noise, and Neuromancer. If it could do that to her nervous system, what would her frame of mind be? It says, he was fond of broad gestures, she said, and then Riviera was beside her, radiant with drugs. Into her darkness, page 236, in 236, into her darkness, a churning synaesthesia, the mingling of the senses, where her pain was the taste of old iron, scent of melon, wings of a moth brushing her cheek. She was unconscious, and he was barred from her dreams. When the optic chip flared, the alphanumerics were haloed, each one ringed with a faint pink aura. So, look, the book is, I think that Neuromancer, I'm so glad Circle G, shouts out to Circle G who sent me this book. Neuromancer and White Noise are twin dialectical Yakin and Boaz pillars of, J.C. Miller, of the technocratic bibliomancy. It's a good term. And both are they're completely disparate stories, but they are essentially framing the world as it was going to become, and it's still becoming, in this phosphorescent haze. And it's not just, it's where the digital world soaks into the natural world, and where the landscape of values and art and imagination, as they get bigger, can create this vacuum effect in the people who unknowingly become addicted to them in the drabbest ways. Like J.G. Ballard said, the future is boring. These books are exciting, and the world, in other words, the world as it is, and the world that we want is full of life and possibilities because of the things that have always been. Right? That's an orthodoxical attitude, isn't it? That the things that the only things that really matter are the things that really anybody should be able to say this, that when you read God's breath in scripture, that is the world. That everything else mirrors that. Everything, when God creates the world in Genesis, that is the way that creation happens and is mimicked in technology. We have sound waves, and nature is ordered. The way that our bodies work, and the way that we create, that we manufacture, the way that we do everything is a mirror of the way that God encoded in us, and that God creates infinitely every second. So these things are, technology is great. Technology is supposed to make our lives, easier. But the danger is that when it supplants it supplants values. Ideology is not belief. Molly Apple says, "Let there be cat videos." Fuck yeah, dude. Have you seen that cat playing that synthesizer? I know there's a lot of those, but I'm talking the one video. This cat can play a synth. This cat plays the Dune score. It's crazy, dude. I like those. I like those videos. Probably postmodern horror is that they put those buttons on the floor, and the dog can play the buttons with the Kim, what's her name? Kim Kardashian voice. And the dogs are on the home video ring camera on the inside doing twirls endlessly to Kim Kardashian's voice. That is postmodern horror, but it's also kind of funny. It's also kind of a funny video. So anyway, I would recommend watching this William Gibson on the Dawn of the Internet video, and also the J.G. Ballard interviews. They are fascinating. He's a great writer to listen to watch interviews with, because he's actually extremely normal. He's a regular, and I mean normal in the best way. He's like a regular guy talking about art, and his books are great to read. Also, again, that Tarantino Rogan, is actually really good. Roger Avery's on there. Roger Avery wrote Pulp Fiction, and he wrote Killing Zoe, which is like a hyper postmodern movie. It's pretty wild, but he's kind of a foil in the interview, and he goes on. What's crazy about it is that it's good to watch, but at the end of the interview, he talks about this horrible event that happened with his wife in a car crash. And, Avery was locked up because of that car crash, but he kind of encapsulates what happened at the end of it. He kind of encapsulates this. He says, like, he got on the ground and he was asking for her to live. He just wants, please let her live. But the question is, who are you asking? Right? Who are you? Pray to, and maybe that was a prayer. I don't know Roger Avery, and I hope that he's based, because he does. But Roger Avery does go on to talk about how he's got a friend from let's say Enero the 6th who's still locked up, and he talks about MSM. He seems to be pretty based on political issues. And I think that it would be fascinating to do an interview with Roger Avery. I think it would be great. But what kind of how he talks at the end of the interview is how a lot of media people are talking now in a third person way. And we see that with the proliferation of pronouns and all that stuff, which, it is what it is. Okay. But when the basic functions of who we are and how we know about ourselves and our identity become wrapped up with how people we want to be called or whatever, then we see that there's a loss of self. So, yes, cats can sense and repel demons. They are psychopomps, and they can keep that demon out of you. Don't put that mirror on your exterior, on the wall by the door. Did you know that? That's an old thing. Don't put the mirror on a exterior wall, because it is a portal. All right, so let's look and see if we got any support here. Please support, you guys. I really appreciate your support. It would be great if you supported me. Thank you so much. Hey, Kristen drops $5 and says, thanks. Kristen, thank you so much. That is awesome. Thank you for the support. Really appreciate you. Thanks to Jason, who drops me $5 on PayPal. Appreciate you as always, Jason. Let's see. We got, hey, Ivan sent $20 and said, really appreciate your content and feel like it is time to contribute again. Thank you, Ivan. Really appreciate you. That is awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, Rand sponsored a stream. That's Randall. And he sponsored a stream the other day. So thank you very much. Let's see. He sent me so he sponsored a stream. Thank you so much for that sponsored stream. That's $100. And if you want to sponsor a stream, you can still do that. Reach out to me on my email. Email address is on the about page on a laptop or a desktop. Let's see. I think that was last week. Jacob sent me $10. Thank you for that. Let me look, see if we got any super chats. I got to open up the other tab here. So let me stop sharing that. Got to open up this other tab. So let me open that up real quick and check out the. Let's see if we got any sponsorship here. Thank you so much, you guys, for being here. And of course, thank you to Circle G again for sending me that book. I really appreciate it. Let's see if we got any super chats. If you want to, no super chats, you guys send me a super chat if you want me to read your comments, ask me questions. This is a purely literary stream. This is a pure literary stream. We didn't cover any movies here. Didn't talk about Annihilation, the movie. I'm going to wait to talk about Annihilation because I'm going to talk about the book. Annihilation is a book. Hey, thank you so much to, let's see, MWB Stories and Book Reviews. He drops me, what's that? Australian 50 bucks? Thank you so much. Thanks, BLA. Always enjoying watching you. Hey, thank you so much, homeboy. Really appreciate you. Let me close this tab because I'm fucking buffering again. Getting buff. Thank you so much for that super chat. Hey, listen. We're going into the holiday season here. And you guys remember in like the Obama era where, Tea Party people got real pissed about, they were like, I keep wishing people Merry Christmas and they keep saying back to me, Happy Holidays. Well, a holiday is a holy day. So that's all right. And by the way, when you wish somebody Merry Christmas, it's not it doesn't matter if it's what they want to hear. It's what you want to say. It comes from you. For you, it's Merry Christmas. So if you wish them a Merry Christmas, that's fine. And if somebody says back to me, Happy Kwanzaa, that's coming from them. So I say, hey, appreciate you, homeboy. All right? Thank you for your goodwill. Merry Christmas back to you. Merry Christmas back to you. Charlie, stay clean out there. Everybody stay clean. Infowar.com. That's what I say to them. So, anyway, so thank you, everybody who's been here tonight. I really appreciate you guys for being here. You are the best. Thank you for being here for this long literary stream. I'll be covering Don DeLeo's Underworld coming up. That's a massive book. And what's the other one I got? Serum by Edward Rutherford, another massive, about 1,000 pages. It's a historical fiction about England. Covering Shakespeare coming up. I've asked for a bunch of books for Christmas, so we'll see if those come up. And if you've got a suggestion for a book you want me to cover, send it my way. I really want to dig into the Wasteland biography. There's a Wasteland biography, another massive book. Hopefully I get that at Christmas. Massive book about how Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot came up with the Wasteland and what it means as a giant troll. Hey, I'm no expert. Drops $10. Super chat. Thank you. Great content as always. Gibson's Mona Lisa Overdrive and short story collection Burning Chrome. Recommend. Hey, thank you so much. I thank you so much for that super chat. These books are fantastic. I think that I experienced a thing the other day with O. Henry story. And I don't like O. Henry. I get to the point where I've avoided, early 20th century naturalism too. McTeague by Frank Norris. McTeague is a book on, it's a brutal book and it's about human being as beast. And what would it cost to get more Dostoevsky streams with Big T? Listen, drop me $100 and I will do a Dostoevsky stream. It's not that I've avoided more Dostoevsky. There's just a lot. There's a lot to get to. So, but I need to get back into, there's a lot that I need to get back into, but there's just, we've covered so much. Kit says, just got Underworld delivered last week. Guess I got to get through it quick. Well, I'll be covering DeLeo and also, what's the other McCarthy book that I just asked for? The Crossing, and we did The Crossing. What's the other one? We've covered like 7 McCarthy books here, but there's just, I don't know. I've covered a lot of stuff, and I'll be looking at the Christmas Nosferatu movie that comes out at Christmas, but I just need more. I need more. I think you go through a period of, at least I do. I go through a period of searching for a writer who, like, it's like their words are haloed in violence. I don't know how to explain it, but words to me on a page, I get electrified and invigorated by writers who bleed on the page in black blood, and that there's a great mental and psychic spiritual release by them giving everything to a book, and that becomes rare. It's so rare. So I'm searching right now because I feel like I'm in a vacuum. I've read so much, and you get to I need to get to a point where there's something new. There's just something new, and I love Neuromancer because I don't really dive into science fiction that much. We've covered a lot of science fiction, but we don't cover it. It's not that old of a part of my life. So I like experiencing an electrifying new language. So that's going to be about it, you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the support. If you want to support me, you can reach out to me anytime. You can always do that. And please follow me on Instagram. Please, help me get these numbers up. And shouts out to all my family and friends out there, everybody out there. It's that time of year. So much crazy stuff happening. I'm going to go outside and see if I can see anything. Look, it's an SUV. It's an SUV in the fucking sky. Joey, why can't you be more like your brother Tony? He's out there. He's looking at he saw the aliens come off of the ocean. Your brother Tony is out there hustling all day, and he's looking at the drones coming off of the ocean. They're here. They filmed War of the Worlds here 20 years ago. You don't think that's happening? Your brother Tony told me about Bluebeam. Why can't you do anything, Joey? All you do is go down and try to buy tchotchkes and eat your cheesesteak all day. You need to be an earner. You need to start earning. And by earning, I'm talking about some real capital. Some real capital by filming a non-fuzzy, hazy video on that iPhone I paid for. Okay, Mom. Sorry, I broke your heart. So that's what I'm going to go do. All right, you guys. I love you. That's about it. I'm out of here. Peace out. I'll see you. Peace. I love y'all. Peace.